for our presenters and the people who joined today's webinar. We ask your permission if we can record our today's the webinar for the further information sharing to those who couldn't join today. So is that okay for you? Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you again. And my name is Purevdulam. I think we can start now since it's 3 minutes past. My name is Purevdulam. I'm a capacity building co-chair at the Mongolia Evaluation Association. And as a tradition in the last 3 years, we are now hosting the November's the learning session under the theme today's the webinar. So okay, so I would like to introduce today's webinar's presenters, Miss Ada Ocampo, sorry name, and Thomas Rossmueller from UNICEF, and others from the IDS. Okay, so we can start now, and after the presentation, we can discuss more about today's topic and asking the questions and sharing the information, exchange the knowledge and so on. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pooja. Then let me share my presentation and we can take it from here.
Okay.
Okay, just let me know. I hope you can see it and it's in presenter mode. Okay,
yep.
Perfect. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. And good morning if you're like Ada and me joining from the other side of the world. Here it's 7 in the morning in New York. Yeah, just to also introduce the two of us who will be presenting today's webinar on accelerating progress towards the 2030 agenda and the role of country-led SDG evaluations in that. I am Thomas Rossmueller. I'm a Partnerships and Capacity Development Officer at the UNICEF Evaluation Office in New York. There, I have these two hats. I work on partnerships with several other UN agencies on evaluation synthesis and capacity building and advocating for SDG evaluations, like this one here. But I'm also involved in several internal and external capacity development initiatives. And let me hand over to Ada. You want to say a few words, Ada? And hi to everybody.
Sure. Yes, sure. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be with you today. I am currently the president of IDEAS. IDEAS stands for International Development Evaluation Association, and IDEAS is a global network of volunteers evaluators. And I'm former UN staff. I have worked in several agencies, but most of my time I worked in UNICEF, with UNICEF. And in the last 2 years, Thomas and I worked together. So it's a pleasure to be with you this morning for us, and this evening for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ada. So just quickly how we will go through this webinar. So our objectives are to give you an overview about the importance and raise your awareness about the Agenda 2030 on sustainable development's follow-up and review processes, why they are important, about one milestone resolution on strengthening the VNRs through country-led evaluation that was adopted last year. That would be one part. I want to give you a better understanding about, of course, the relevance of embedding the principles of the 2030 agenda in country-led evaluations and other follow-up and review processes. And in general, we want to, you're all invited here from the Mongolian Evaluation Association. It's been doing great work in advocacy and capacity building. So you already probably have an appreciation of the role of evaluation to, come up with more fair and equal public policies, to facilitate policy dialogues, and to strengthen and improve the reporting on the SDGs. So in the beginning, I will talk a little bit about the resolution and the agenda, and in general, what is country-led SDG evaluations and why is it important? And then I will hand over to Ada, who will give you a very brief step-by-step walk through the key steps of a country-led SDG evaluation. What we will share with you after this workshop is this guidebook here. Maybe some of you have already seen it. That came out in 2020 and is currently being revised. And most of the things that you will see in this hour, in this 45 minutes that we will present, you can also find in this guidebook in way more detail. This is really on how to do an SDG evaluation, the key steps, everything you need to think about from the inception in the beginning up to the communication plan at the end. But not everything was included in this first edition, so that's why now the partners here, IDEAS, UNICEF, that are represented, but also now DEVAL and the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland, as a group, we're currently updating it. We're almost done, and we added some more interesting chapters about the triggering the political decision to do a country-led SDG evaluation, and then also how to really plan for uptake and utilization of this evaluation. So we'll send you that. It's available in several languages. And if you sign up for the Eval SDGs Google group, the IDEAS newsletter, or some other form of evaluation network, then you will probably also get some information when the new one is out. So that's just quickly on that. So I already mentioned the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I will not spend too much time on that, because I think we're all familiar with what it is. What's important, of course, it established the SDGs that can be shown in different ways now. We have the 17 SDGs, but what's important for us is that paragraph 72 to 77, where the agenda talks about the follow-up and review processes. And there is one part highlighted here is that the follow-up and review processes of how countries implement the 2030 agenda and make sure that they achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, they will have to do some processes for reviewing and following up. And these processes, defined in later resolutions, they will be rigorous and based on evidence and informed by country-led evaluations. It also has a paragraph, sub-paragraph here on that there is a need to enhance capacity building, like it's done here, to make the best out of this and improve these review processes. But what's important is that the agenda itself calls for country-led evaluations of the SDGs that need to be done to review the progress. Unfortunately, in our group of partners and also some other scholars looked into that, we found that a lot of countries have submitted voluntary national reviews that I will explain in a minute, but only few of them have conducted country-led SDG evaluations. So out of the 193 countries, we only found a few that really did a country-led evaluation of one or multiple SDGs. And because of that, some actors came together and were advocating for a new resolution. And this new resolution, I have already mentioned, I'm just skipping through here, was adopted last year, and it's called Strengthening Voluntary National Reviews Through Country-Led Evaluations. It was a milestone resolution because it's a short and concise resolution, but calls for doing this country-led SDG evaluations for all states. It was adopted last year without a vote. It was led by Nigeria, who's a champion and in the evaluation field, but also did actually 2 SDG evaluations and is currently planning for another 1 or 2. They evaluated SDG 3 and 4. And it was co-sponsored by 24 other countries. Do you know if Mongolia was one of them?
Yes. Well, Mongolia is one of the supporters.
Exactly. Yeah, so Mongolia is one of the 24. Very glad to see that actively supported the resolution. I mean, it was adopted by everybody, but these countries really stood behind it and advocated for the adoption and overcame some obstacles, and it was adopted. So thank you very much also to Mongolia and whoever was involved in getting this done. Let me move on just quickly. What's in the resolution? It has a few action paragraphs that I have here. So there are three main parts, I would say. First, it calls for countries to do country-led evaluations and add them to their voluntary national reviews. So the voluntary national reviews should have a component or be based on country-led evaluations. That's this paragraph 1 here. But it also encourages member states to use the evidence from such evaluations for their own decision-making. So this is important because country-led SDG evaluations are not only done for the VNRs. They have a way bigger, use way beyond just the VNRs. They're actually done for, improving decision-making, improving programs. So it's important to have that here articulated. And in paragraph 4, the resolution calls for UN agencies to provide support. UNICEF supported Nigeria in their SDG evaluations. And with this, UN agencies have a mandate to support countries that are undertaking such evaluations. So if Mongolia hopefully will do one, I hope they will also reach out if there is a need for support, of course. And the UN will try to support and provide advice or guidance in this process. Okay, enough of the resolution. So I will move on quickly since we have limited time. So what difference can these SDG evaluations make in the end? Why are we advocating for it? Let's see. Very briefly, usually Ada and I deliver this workshop over at least half a day or a full day. So we have to rush through some slides and have to cut some parts. So overall, we do evaluations of the Sustainable Development Goals. Why? Because when you look at the last SDG report, you find that most SDGs are severely off track. Only 17% actually are on track. Nearly half of them have minimal or moderate progress. And over 1/3 of the SDGs are even regressing, or there's no progress at all. I will show you another picture how that looks like. It's like this. So you can see this is, of course, the global view. Some countries might have already even achieved some of the goals, but overall, as a global community, that's how it looks like. There are only a few SDGs that show progress, but most of them are now actually going back. In part because of the COVID-19 pandemic that unfortunately reversed a lot of progress and caused lots of other crises, as you know. But yeah, so it's been hard to get back on track after this pandemic. But overall, we're still going back on some of them. I will not go into detail into these things, and you can have a look when we share the presentation after this webinar. But I have a similar chart from last year that shows one important thing that's missing on this chart here. And it's the gray zones. Last year, the gray zones were included, and they show where we actually don't have data to know how good or rather bad we are doing. So the point here is that progress is not even, it's not only bad and going back in many ways, but we're also missing a lot of evidence and data to even know where we are. There are big data gaps. So that's the main reasons to do this SDG evaluation. So to have the evidence to fill these data gaps, but also get back on track with the lessons learned from the SDG evaluations towards achieving the SDGs. In the sum up slide, when you do country-led SDG evaluations, through them, you of course strengthen the evidence base for your own in-country policy and decision making. You can do better informed policies and programs and decisions of national interest if you have better evidence available. You can improve strategies and national development plans for sustainable developments. Of course, context changes. So with SDG evaluations and evaluations in general, you can learn in the middle of important processes or changing contexts, and you can course correct where necessary. And what I already mentioned is we have lots of evidence gaps, not only with the SDGs, probably also in Mongolia, in many areas that are of concern, for the general population. And with SDG evaluations, you can identify and then fill this evidence and data gaps. When you have the evidence from these evaluations, you can, of course, better allocate the resources in the areas that are of priority. Evaluations can provide guidance for the national policies, not only, informing them, but guidance on how to align them with the SDGs and the 2030 agenda. That is actually one of the main parts also of the guidebook. When you do these SDG evaluations, they're done in a very participatory way in the country, and then also you can share with other countries. Ada will talk about that. So it's also good for fostering partnerships between different stakeholders. You probably have a lot of different stakeholders in the Mongolian Evaluation Association and work from, government, OPIS, everybody, UN organizations. So doing that in a joint way with support from the UN and involving lots of other partners is a great way to really establish these strong partnerships and collaboration. And overall, with the results or with doing an SDG evaluation, you also contribute to the global reporting on the SDGs. It's not only feeding into the VNRs, but groups like ours, like Ada and me and lots of other partners, we collect actually, the experiences from countries doing SDG evaluations, and we try to share it. You will hear from some examples later on. So you contribute to this global knowledge pool in doing SDG evaluations. So one part here is also very briefly the VNRs. I think most of you probably have heard, ideally were involved, but probably not, in the voluntary national review, one or the other of Mongolia. So Mongolia for sure has submitted one, but do you know if you have submitted more than one?
I think we submitted two. The first one in 2021, or second one was in 2023. I had a chance to attend the presentation of the WNR 2023. Yeah.
Wonderful. I would love to hear your experience there. But if someone here is not too familiar with the VNRs, so this is, as I mentioned, one of the processes to report on progress towards the SDGs. It's a key mechanism, and Pucci, if you heard about it, maybe you saw the presentation at the high-level political forum on sustainable development in New York. So that's a forum that happens every year in July, where countries present their VNRs to the other countries. Last time we checked, 188, so most countries had submitted VNRs, but only a few actually included evaluative evidence, evaluations there. Very briefly, Pucci, do you know if evaluation was included in one of them? If it was quoted or used?
Yeah, kind of. It is really sad that evidence-based, because all the relative data was collected through the National Statistic Offices, and I saw that, but not sure really about what you are talking about. More the evolution-related concept.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's mostly that it just uses data That's on the next slide, and not evaluative evidence. So that's one of the problems. So what's the difference? Let's quickly talk about that between VNRs and country-led evaluations. So VNRs are the tools, it's the report for the follow-up and the review framework of the 2030 agenda. And of course, countries are more or less free. There's a handbook that guides them on how to do it and best practices. And since last year, this handbook also mentions the new resolution and country-led SDG evaluations. Before that, handbook didn't say much about it, and most VNRs are based mostly on monitoring data. So not really evaluative evidence. It's about, how much has been achieved, what has been achieved, and these things, but not why. And there are not that many lessons learned. So it's really just a snapshot, basically produced by the National Statistics Bureau of how the country is doing. Of course, some of them are more comprehensive, others are shorter reports. They vary as much as the countries vary. But country-led SDG evaluations, or evaluations in general, they go way beyond just collecting data, as you know, as evaluators. It's more about collecting different kinds of evidence and information around a certain topic, in this case, programs and policies towards achieving the SDGs. They can inform and complement and should enrich the VNRs, but country-led evaluations go way beyond the report and what the VNR is. It's a way deeper analysis. So you would read the VNR, but if you really want to understand the progress on a certain SDG, reading the SDG evaluation on that will give you a way bigger picture of really what did the country do to make progress, which parts didn't work. So you will have a way more complete view and more lessons through SDG evaluations. And you can use it then for creating better policies and programs. You can use it for advocacy and informed decision-making. VNRs can be used sometimes for that, but it's not the purpose. And just to clarify, both the VNRs and the country-led evaluations are necessary and called for in the follow-up and review part of the Agenda 2030. So countries do their voluntary national reviews, but as I showed you in the paragraphs, the agenda is also calling for country-led evaluations, same as the resolution that I showed you before. So I'm running out of time here. I have to hand over to Ada. This is basically the same slide. You can have a look. It's the differences between VNRs and country-led evaluations again. But let me quickly skip on. So how do you actually use or embed SDG evaluations in voluntary national reviews? For that, we worked on a guide. Back then, it's called Embedding Evaluation in VNRs. We did that for a workshop in Africa, but this is not only the African context. This can be used for basically any country. That's why we also translated it into French, Spanish, and Portuguese. Unfortunately, not Mongolian, but I'm sure you will be okay with the English version. So we will also share that. That will give you a good overview of different ways to embed evaluations and evaluative evidence in VNRs. And you'll see more there, but there are different approaches depending, of course, on the budget, the situation in the country. For example, you can just, if you're now producing a VNR and you want to include evaluation, you can just identify which evaluations already exist. And you look at the results and you use these results if they, if they concern the SDGs, if they are up to date, and include that in the VNR. If you want to go a little deeper, you do something like evaluation synthesis, where you take a whole group of evaluations and you basically produce a new report, a synthesis out of it, of all of the results and lessons learned out of the evaluations, synthesize it, and you'll have a better picture and you know what all of these evaluations are basically saying. Or ideally, as Nigeria did it, you undertake a country-led evaluation and you focus on some of the SDGs and you do a deep dive into which policies and programs and interventions were done to make progress towards one or more SDGs, and you analyze and collect data and evaluate and use that for the VNR. And then, of course, you can do all of the above. You can do a country-led SDG evaluation of certain SDGs, like Nigeria did of 3 and 4. You synthesize the results from some other evaluations that have, that are somehow connected or closely connected with each other. And then maybe for some others, you just see which evaluations are out there and you use their results if they work and if they're up to date, of course. Okay, I think that was my part to just give you an overview of these different ingredients. I will now hand over to Ada to actually take you through step by step an SDG evaluation. Ada, you ready?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Thomas. That was very useful. Before I start, I would like to know whether there is a question probably for clarification from the audience, so we don't go directly.
Дараагийн илтгэгч рүүгээ шилжихээс өмнө асуулт та бүхэн дэвэл асууж болох юм байна. Асуулт асуугаад дараагийн илтгэгч рүүгээ шилжих боломжтой юм байна. Асуултаагаа болов уу? I think there's no question so far. We can continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thomas, will you continue with the slides or shall I
Yes.
share my screen? You can continue.
I can, as you like. Should I continue?
Okay,
and
that's
you just
okay.
come in? Okay.
That's okay. Thank you. Well, as Thomas has mentioned, we will go now defining what is an SDG evaluation, and we'll go through key steps for designing and implementing an SDG evaluation. Important to mention that the steps that we'll go through will also allow you to build your terms of reference for an evaluation. And we will see how to do that. First of all, what is an SDG evaluation? Many people say it's an evaluation as any other. Yeah, but there are some differences that are important. An SDG evaluation, as many other evaluations, determines the merit, the worth, the significance, and also the sustainability. But here is the difference, not of projects, not of small initiatives, but the merit, the worth, the significance, and sustainability of national strategies, national public policies, or national programs that contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. So it means that our subject of analysis, where we focus our evaluation, will be national strategies, policies, or national programs, because those are supposed to be contributing to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. An SDG evaluation also investigates the complex interactions between the human, economic, and natural system. If you have read or have a bit of time in the next days, weeks to read the Agenda 2030, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, you will see that this agenda is transformational because it actually calls upon connecting human, economic, and natural systems, and not only to focus on one aspect, but to connect these dimensions, and these are reflected in the goals. So we have some SDGs that are specifically related to, let's say, the human part, which is, for example, education, poverty reduction, zero hunger, health, etc. And there are some others that are related to the economic part, and others that are related to climate, environment, etc. And that's why the SDGs are no longer presented in a linear way, but there are more, the interconnections between them are mainly shown. This means that the SDGs actually show this connection between the human, economic, and natural systems, and the evaluation should also acknowledge this connection and actually be able to determine to what extent these interactions are allowing countries to make progress or not. An SDG evaluation looks at the effects of laws, regulations, and procedures within and beyond geographic boundaries in which they are adopted. What this means that when we talk about national systems, national situations, national analysis, and to what extent the countries are achieving or making progress towards the SDGs, we have to acknowledge that these countries interact into legal frameworks, institutional frameworks, interactions, and those are the frameworks that actually have an effect, positive or negative, on the extent to which we are making progress or not towards the SDGs. If there, for example, are laws that refrain participation of civil society, if there would be laws that refrain or that constrain the quality of the education that is provided at the national level, then very unlikely the progress towards the SDG is going to be great. Therefore, when we analyze the SDGs through the SDGs evaluations, we not only look at how indicators are progressing, but we also look at the effects of positive or negative of laws, regulations, etc. And this is why evaluations are important. And with the BNR is actually a very good practice to report and present of the BNR is a very good practice because countries demonstrate accountability by doing that. But the BNRs are important, are relevant, but are not enough. And this is why the resolution came, because it's not enough just to present numbers, because actually numbers will, in a very limited way, show the extent to which there is an enabling or refraining environment in the country for the achievement of the SDGs. It will rarely tell who is benefiting and why, whether this principle of no one left behind is actually, we are actually walking the talk towards this or not. So the aim of an SDG evaluation is not just to report. Report is a means towards an end. The end should be the changes, the transformational changes that evaluation is looking for. So an SDG evaluation, can you go to the next? And why we call it country-led evaluation. Now, we talked about the evaluation. Now, why it is country-led? Because an evaluation that is managed and used by governments with the participation of broad sector of society, and usually with the cooperation of development agencies, international organizations, etc. So the difference is that this evaluation is supposed to be spearheaded by the government. But although managed and led by government, this evaluation should be conducted in an inclusive process, open to key national stakeholders, in line with the principles underlying the 2030 Agenda. And considering that the SDGs are led, managed, and monitored at the national level, their evaluations must also be country-led to ensure that countries are at the helm of their own development. Next, please. Well, I will go quickly for this, but we call it that SDGs evaluations are complex evaluations because they have to deal with complexity and then they have to illustrate how complexity is working. It's not that the evaluations of the SDGs are complicated, Mainly, they are complex because they should show the complexity. So they are multilinear rather than linear causality, and they look at several dimensions, social, economic, etc. When we say multilinear causality, it means that it's not only a one-one relation between cause and effect. So the if-then is not really what happens. We can have several causes producing one effect or several causes producing several effects if we take into account all these dimensions. And to take into account all the dimensions means that we are focusing on a systems thinking approach. The unit of analysis I mentioned before are public policies or national plans or strategies. And they are multidimensional and involve several actors. They should be participatory. They are based upon international agreed criteria standards as well as for the principles of the 2030 Agenda. So what we proposed in the guidebook is that the principles of the 2030 Agenda should also serve as criteria for evaluation, complementing the OECD DAC criteria. And the principles of the 2030 Agenda guide both the design, the management arrangements, and the evaluation approach. The participatory approach is non-negotiable, so there shouldn't be an SDG evaluation that is non-participatory. And the use of the evaluation is linked to good governance. Why? Because the idea is if we evaluate the public policy with an SDGs lens, it should be to inform that public policy and therefore the possibility of the government to account for it and for the progress made towards the SDGs. So the idea is to have better and more equitable public policies through the country-led evaluations of the SDGs. Next, please.
Okay, Ada, and I'm just looking at the clock. I think we have like 10 minutes or so.
Okay, sure, thank you.
All right. So
let's go directly to the main steps now. So as I said before, yeah, these are the steps. Well, in the guidebook, we are adding 2 new steps and chapters, which are one, how to initiate the evaluation, so how to trigger the government decision to evaluate the SDGs, and also use and influence. But the steps that are here are identify the overall objective of or the purpose of the evaluation, prepare for an SDG evaluation by designing participatory process, defining the scope and focus of the evaluation. As Thomas was saying, some countries focus on 2 specific SDGs or in one or in several. Uganda, for example, decided to look at the 17 SDGs, but through the lens of the principle of leave no one behind. And there are several approaches, and then identify policies and plans to be evaluated. Use of the agenda principles to inform criteria and questions. So we are talking now with the evaluation criteria and the evaluation questions, and frame the evaluation by reconstructing the logic, the theory of change, and develop a cost communication plan. So the steps are there. I know that we are rushing, but you will have the link to the guidebook and you may wish to look at them more quickly. In all these parts, we have to take into account that the stakeholders should be engaged in a true participatory way. Next, please. So for the participatory decision-making process, we are not just talking about participation in data collection and analysis, but we are talking mainly about institutionalizing participation. What do we mean? It means that stakeholders should participate throughout the evaluation. And to ensure that, we propose that a stakeholder analysis, which is an instrument that is described in the guidebook as well, is done to be able to decide who should be involved in the decision-making throughout the evaluation and how this should be made. So we make the decision and we document the decision results in the TOR. Next, please. So the first part of your TOR is going to be the analysis of the evaluation background. So we will formulate questions like, does your country have a national development plan or equivalent? Can be a national sustainable plan, a national strategy for the country, etc. What are the priorities, SDGs, and targets for your countries? When is the next election, in case you want to bring this debate to the elections period that has been done by Finland, for example? This is not necessarily the questions for all countries, but these are some guiding questions. Is there explicit political interest in the SDGs? Why we talk about political interest? Because the decisions at the national level are mainly political. Are mainly political in the sense that the government takes political decision, and we need to test whether the political decision is there in order to see whether we can actually advocate for a country-led evaluation of the SDGs. Has your country already submitted one or more VNRs? Which entity is in charge of SDGs implementation in your country? Does your national statistical system collect data on SDGs indicator? So the answers to this question shall inform the background section of your TOR. Next, please. Deciding on the evaluation purpose. What is the purpose of the SDGs evaluation? Is it to influence policy decision-making and fit into the strategic planning cycle, which is the most of the evaluations done so far focus on this part, because they want to influence policy decision-making actually to ensure more equal and just public policies, and by doing that, to ensure the progress towards the SDGs. In the case of Finland, it was also influenced the political debate. And in the case of as many countries now, not many countries, but countries that have done the VNRs to influence the VNR as well. There we have some examples of the evaluation purpose. Costa Rica wanted to inform decision-making with regards to developing public policies. Finland wanted to generate concrete recommendations on the future directions that Finland's sustainable development policies should take. And the sustainable development policy of Finland is the equivalent of a national development plan. So they wanted to inform how this national development plan should be influenced to be able to make accelerate progress towards the SDGs. Next, please. We talked a lot about the importance of participation and institutionalizing participation throughout. So how can we do that in order to ensure that participation will be institutionalized throughout? So we are talking about participatory bodies or entities that shall be established from the outset, no? So when we talk about participatory bodies, we say that these participatory bodies should be able to take decisions on key aspects of the evaluation. For example, we are talking about a steering committee of the evaluation. A steering committee that can be formed by line ministries, some other key actors, sometimes parliamentarians, but a group that is manageable, not everybody, selected people representing these stakeholders that actually have a stake on this evaluation. Who is going to manage this evaluation? So are we going to establish a management team for the evaluation, for example? Who is going to participate there? What are the roles of this management team? Are we going to have a reference group or an advisory group for the evaluation, or both? What are the roles that they're going to have? Who is going to have the quality assurance role? And what are the stakeholders that are going to participate in each of these levels? And the answer to these questions block shall inform the evaluation management section of your terms of reference. Next, please. So here is an example of the participatory bodies that were established by Finland with the group composition and what was the expected role or contribution. So we had a steering group, a support group, a group of international experts, a sustainable development stakeholder community group that was open, and the Committee to the Future, the Finnish Parliament. So if you see, these are the ones that Finland established. They have some commonalities, but as well some difference with other countries. And there you can see when you receive the PowerPoint, how each group was composed and what was the contribution they made to the evaluation. So as mentioned before, they have some quality roles, some quality assurance roles, decision-making roles, etc., advisory role. So the answers to these questions shall inform the scope and focus of your evaluation, the TOR of your evaluation. Next, please. So how did it, and for example, this is how did Nigeria prioritize their SDGs to be selected? So they established this criteria that goes from whether there is political will, whether there are programs that are actually contributing to the SDGs, whether there are baselines or previous exercises, evaluations, etc., whether the coverage is at the national level or it's a very important coverage, etc. So once they established the criteria, next please, they went to rank all the SDGs. How they did this? In a workshop with line ministries, the BOPE was present, some NGOs were present, international organizations were present, and they all together discussed about how to rank these criteria. You see the letter represent the previously shown criteria, and they established a score. And by doing this, they selected SDG 3 and 4 to be the first two evaluations to be done by the country. The reports are ready, are available in the public domain. And if you would like to see them, you just Google or we can send them to you. They are also available at the El Valle SDGs website. And they are now preparing for the evaluation of goal number 1, that is poverty reduction. So that's the way they did it. You will find more information in the guidebook as well. Next, please. To decide on the evaluation criteria and questions for an SDGs evaluation, you have to ask what participatory bodies of the ones mentioned before shall be involved in the selection of evaluation criteria and questions, or in reviewing it, or in quality assuring them. What process is going to be used to make this decision? At the end, what evaluation criteria was selected, and including principles of the agenda plus standard criteria, and what evaluation questions have been formulated. So the answers to these questions shall inform the evaluation criteria and questions section of the TOR. Next, please. Just as a reminder of what the evaluation criteria is, the 6 now, and what are the examples of questions that can be formulated. Next, please. And these are the agenda principles that are useful in evaluation that can also be used to ask evaluation criteria of questions. We don't need to take them all, but we need to prioritize the ones that are really relevant to the evaluation that we are doing. Next, please. Here, if we take, for example, if we decide to take the evaluation that is really recommended, the agenda principles as criteria, here are some examples of questions you may wish to ask. For example, do national policy frameworks are interconnected and consider the interconnected nature of sustainable development? What groups of or individuals have benefited from public policies? And Are public policies and strategies increasing or decreasing inequality gaps? Next, please. And there we have more examples. Can we go next, please? So here are examples that, for example, Costa Rica selected 3 principles to be converted in criteria: leave no one behind, equity, and resilience. And the reasons for leave one no behind and equity are obvious, but the reasons why they took resilience, and now in the new evaluation they have taken environmental sustainability, because the focus of Costa Rica is mainly on evaluations that have to do with the environment, but they put a social and economic lens. For example, the last evaluation of the SDGs was on their national biodiversity strategy, which is key to a country like Costa Rica. Next, please. Deciding on the approach to reconstruct the logic of the evaluation or the theory of change. So again, what participatory bodies shall be involved in making decisions regarding approaches to reconstruct the theory of change, and what approach was selected: theory of change, system thinking, complexity considerations, etc. And the answers to these questions shall inform the evaluation approach section of the TOR. Next, please. And for the methodology, due to the time restrictions, we decided just to put an example again of Finland, how they put together their methodology. And so they established some indicators, SDG index and dashboard indicators baskets, etc. They identify central documents, key documents. Here are some examples. They're not all of them. It's not a full list. Government programs of strategies, preparatory documents for for national projects or EU-related programs because they belong to the EU. They developed and implemented a closed survey for actors in sustainable development, 27 respondents, and an open poll of 211. Interviews to 78 people among key experts, representatives of all ministries, an expert panel, etc. And they implemented 3 workshops. Two of the workshops open to stakeholders with about 80 and 40 participants, and 1 workshop with international experts to get the view, more the outsider's view, but with a technical perspective. Next, please. And development of the communication plan, again, the same question that we have been asking: which participatory bodies should be involved? This is important. What are the stakeholders that should be targeted in the process of dissemination and communication of evaluation results? This is a very important question, because the answer to these questions, if seriously considered, will actually ensure the use and influence of the evaluation. What communication products shall be developed for each of the priority groups of the stakeholders? And the answers to these questions shall inform the dissemination and communication section of your TOR. Next, please. And this is, again, Finland with an example. They developed a report of 80 pages, a short policy briefing in Finnish and in English that was widely disseminated, several blogs, Twitter material, and PowerPoint presentations. Next, please. Finally, we'd like to remind you that this is the EVAL SDGs website. Well, there are various sites that now contains many of this information, but it is concentrated in the EVAL SDGs website that we encourage you to visit. And we remind you about 3 main resources: the guidebook that we have mainly based upon, the embedding evaluation voluntary national reviews that Thomas has referred to, and various briefings that were issued by EVAL SDGs and partners on different aspects of country-led evaluations of the SDGs. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ada. And here on the last slide, I just have our email addresses that we'll also share with you. And yeah, we did it in 1 hour, Ada. I think it was the first time. Not really within the 45 minutes, but close enough. And yeah, with this, I hope we gave the participants kind of a taste of what SDG evaluations are, make you interested, and also show you, you already have a strong evaluation association, it seems. You have support from great colleagues from the UN and a colleague from UNICEF and some others. So, it can be done. Others are currently doing SDG evaluations. We have some examples of that we also showed of countries that finalized and shared the lessons learned, that we're also happy to send to you if you have any questions or want to see how others did it. And yeah, hopefully this was useful to you. Yeah, we can go into some questions. Just let me stop sharing here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Thomas and Ada. This is really, really eye-opening presentation and very insightful and very resourceful as well. Thank you very much. Now, since we have very short time, we can ask the questions from the audience. Chim,
Yes.
go ahead, please.
Hi, Thomas and Ada. Thanks very much for very rich content and learned a lot. I participated your workshop in Manila last year, but still, I think that was first time and I got only a glimpse of it. But now after 1 year almost, especially Mongolian Evaluation Association, now we are aiming towards to promote country-led evaluation in our country, support our government. So it was a topic that was very strategic and important for all of us. So my question to you is, what's the role of FOPE for promoting country-led evaluation, and if any specific examples of other countries have done so? And second question is, Ada, you mentioned that the uniqueness of country-led evaluation is it focuses the unit of analysis is national public policies or programs, right? But in the case of Mongolia, also hopefully, not hopefully, just assuming that many other countries, the private sector play a lot of role. So they contribute to SDG, maybe not through the public policies or programs, but with their own actions and the market-driven, these big contributions. So where does stand the public sector in this country-led evaluation? Are they left behind? If I put it that way. So thanks very much.
And you mean the private sector, or not the public?
Private.
Yeah,
private sector or informal sector as well.
Okay. Thank you. Should we take another question?
Yes, I think so.
Hey, Shinjin. Good to see you.
Hi. Hey, Thomas. Hi, Ada. It's really nice to see you here. Thank you so much for this very informative presentation. So helpful. And also thank the Mongolia Evaluation Association to organize this. You probably don't know, I am a member of the Mongolia Evaluation Association. So I'm very glad that Chimji asked the question about how to promote this as country-led SDG evaluation in Mongolia. I'm very interested in working with Chimji and others to make this happen. I have two questions. One is, the website Ada shared at the end of her presentation, do we find all the existing country-led SDG evaluation there? That's one question. Second question is, what about the quality assurance mechanisms? Like our individual UN agencies, we have UNICEF has JIRAs. Other UN agencies also have their own, quality assurance mechanism. How about SDG evaluation? How can we make sure that the quality, will be up to expectations? That's it.
Thank you very much, Shinjin. So just to sum up, Jimmy asked about the role of VOPs and how they can participate in that, and also on the private sector, if their contributions towards progress on the SDGs being left behind or seen, or can it also be analyzed with the country-led SDG evaluations. There were also questions on if we can share examples from other countries, Shinxing and Jimmy. So on the website that we shared, and that we will put it in the email, evalsdgs.org, you will find not only these guidebooks, which has examples already from Costa Rica, Finland, Nigeria, but also shorter policy briefs and briefing papers and webinars and inside dialogues on a range of topics. So I would recommend you check that out. Go to the website. You can go to news and guidebooks and materials. You have webinars that we hosted with some of these people that were actually involved in the evaluations. And you can download that. So you don't have to read like 50 pages. You can read a 2-page report on the case of Finland or Nigeria. So we can share that there. Ada, you want to respond to VOPs and the quality assurance mechanisms, since you were also involved in JIROS, and you're still muted.
Sure. Yes, thank you very much for the questions. I think they're very relevant. First, let me complement what Thomas has said. There are some evaluations that are not yet there because they are being finalized, or for example, I'm not sure we have the latest from Costa Rica and the Uganda one, but the links to those evaluations will be included in the second edition of the guidebook. But probably we should also make an effort to put them together and update. In any case, I will do that and let you know. But there are some that are already there, the ones that are completely finalized, etc. They are not being just, I would say, all of the evaluations, 2 from Costa Rica, 2 from Finland, 2 from Nigeria, 1 from Ecuador, 1 are completed, but the latest ones are completed, but they are not necessarily yet public because they are doing some arrangements, etc., on how to publish. But we will keep you posted. But at the moment, there are enough there. With regards to the participation of VOPs, I think VOPs have really a great role to play. The first role I would mention is the importance of advocating for country-led evaluations of the SDGs. And they can advocate through blogs, through small posts in social media. And actually, that is what many VOPs are now doing. Not as many probably as we would like, but the number is increasing. So contributing to disseminate, to raise awareness, etc. That is one role that can actually be done. There is another role that the VOP some few VOPs are doing, because to embed, to get engaged in country-led evaluations of the SDG is a golden opportunity for VOPs to actually be involved in national evaluation processes that many maybe VOPs are not. Some, yes, but many maybe VOPs are not. So this is the way. So another example that few VOPs have done, but with very, very good results, is to organize a workshop, for example, either done totally by the VOP or with the support of people that can be facilitators, can help you, etc. And invite government representatives there and invite international organizations there. Because sometimes you have to identify key champions that are interested. For example, Nigeria started like that. The director of the Ministry of Planning attended the workshop. He was interested. UNICEF supported him. And then they went to the government with UNICEF together, and they explained why this. Then they called the VOP, etc. So if the VOP, for example, through seminars, through workshops, involved governments, so the possibility of sensitizing, of raising awareness is higher. some other BOPEs have connected two countries. Very few, but there are one case at least that I know that the BOPE has connected two countries, one that has done an evaluation and the other that hasn't. So that this connection is important. In the case of this connection, it really didn't work well, but was more an issue of language. I think one was Anglophone and the other was Francophone. But this is something that BOPEs can actually do through peer-to-peer support process, connect the other BOPE from the other country and say, well, let's do something together and bring representatives from our governments so they can speak to each other, and government people like to listen to some other people. So there are many, many ways where bringing one government official with you to an event that you will participate. So there are many, many ways, and I think that definitely the participation of BOPE is important and it can be really influential. With regards to the private sector, I think we have very limited examples of involvement, but their participation is important. Especially in Asia, for example, we have big players interested in evaluation that have funded evaluations. For example, IKEA is only one example, but there are more. So the extent to which we have put a bit of time to involve them in these processes, I think we're still a long way to run on that, but it's important that they participate. For the quality assurance of SDGs evaluations, we can, if you have seen, well, you haven't seen all, but you have seen that Finland have put international experts on board to be consulted from time to time. Nigeria established references groups, more than one, being one of them the stakeholders, the national stakeholders, but the others were a reference group that was mainly composed of people that had some experience, that have some voices, etc. And of course, these mainly work as advisories, but it will depend who you want to be involved into the quality assurance process. It is the reference group only. If it's the advisory group only, I would suggest that both, because the stakeholders group can actually give a perspective that is more from their interests and from the group of people that are actually facing the issues, the problems in the country. Whereas the advisory group can have a more technical look at the TORs and their quality. But last but not least, let's never forget about peer reviewers. And peer reviewers, we can be a bit innovative with the peer reviewers who we choose for a peer review. We can choose a consultant or organizations that have done already evaluation of the SDGs, even outside our countries, or people within our countries that you think that can be very good peer reviewers and can add value to that. I hope I responded. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just wanted to add also, because Pucci, I think you said in the beginning that you were at the presentation of the VNR and also at the workshop. And that just reminded me that usually there are these workshops on how to do a VNR. So if there are, members of the Evaluation Association present at these workshops, they can also use that as a perfect opportunity to advocate for SDG evaluations. Now it's a little bit included, the resolution in the handbook, but still often the topic is, not touched. So if you can advocate there and say, we have the resources, we have the willingness, we know how to do it, we can have support, that's a golden opportunity to, get the evaluation on the table.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just correct me if I understood just different way. As my understanding, this is really, really inspiring and very insightful presentation, especially when we are talking about the VNR. If we are really on track or on behind to the SDG every country, for example, Mongolia, we already submitted 2 VNRs. So meaning that the resolution is suggesting to conduct the country-led evaluation before the VNR or just exclude the VNR. I mean,
Right. Yeah, I'm happy to clarify. And I remember when we were advocating for the resolution, that was also a question that came up because sometimes it's a little bit confusing. So it's 2 different things. The countries will do the VNRs in any way. They can do good VNRs. Some countries do less well-informed VNRs. So the quality will be different, and what is used as a source, as the evidence for the VNR, is different. And most VNRs only use monitoring data, nothing from evaluations. So it's a good snapshot, but in the end, you don't know why the process has achieved, which strategies have worked for the progress towards one SDG or another. So the resolution says you can do better VNRs if you use evaluation, country-led SDG evaluations for that. So it should be basically in preparation for the VNR. You should do country-led SDG evaluations in any case, even without connecting it to the VNR. It's super useful. It goes way beyond the VNRs. It's just, if you do something focused on education, progress towards SDG 4, that's education.
Yeah.
This will be helpful to, improve the situation in the country in any case. So these SDG evaluations are very important for that. But if you do these, you can use the results for creating a way better VNR. Okay. And the resolution says that, to do a way better VNR, you should do this country-led SDG evaluations. I hope that helped a little bit with clarifying, or is it still a mystery?
We will go through more in-depth the resolution, so the better understanding and learning.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, everybody who attended this webinar. The Thomas mentioned that you will share the presentation with us, right? So in case after this the webinar, we will share the presentation with those who participated today's webinar. And we also shared the recording through our MEA's social media platforms. So this is really the good points. And it was a really good time to come up with this country-led evaluation practices, especially in Mongolia. So this is a really time to producing and thinking about because of the new government in Mongolia. So yeah, this is one of our the commitment to promote this very insightful the contribution, at the national level. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just to congratulate the Mongolian Evaluation Association for the work that you are doing, your interest, your commitment. And yes, congratulations, and count on our support at any time. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Much appreciated. All the best to you, and we'll be in touch.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.